Welcome to Racing Roots with Hamm.
If you don't know our host, David Hamm, he's a 25-year NASCAR veteran, engine builder, and jackman.
Live every Monday evening, we have a new guest
From the racing world with their stories, their paths,
Their
racing
roots.
Welcome to Racing Roots.
Now here's our host,
with
David
Hamm,
Hamm.
right here on 550 AM and 92.9 FM. We did not have an opener if you didn't notice that. I just told you, so you definitely know for sure. But that's the way it goes sometimes. Welcome to the world of live radio. But we got Blue Weber in with us this evening, and it's a really exciting evening for us because Blue has a history with, he worked for Ralph Moody back in the day. He didn't work over at Holman and Moody, but after Holman and Moody broke up, Blue Weber ended up going over there to work with him. So
now, my real Christian name back in my Statesville days was Harton Weber, but I picked up a nickname of Blue when I went in the Navy, and that lasted from the time that I got back from the Navy all through my career of building engines.
okay, so the nickname come in the Navy
Yeah,
versus in racing.
that's correct.
Because, typically in racing, everybody seems to have a nickname most of the time. Is the way it goes.
Yeah.
So what was it, Blue? Because of the ocean blue? Blue sailed the ocean blue?
That's too much of a long story to go into, but the nickname stuck. All the people in my squad all had one-syllable nicknames because we had to communicate with each other real quickly.
Okay.
And so Harton wasn't exactly a name that you heard much.
Yeah.
But anybody from Statesville and all the way through high school knew me by that name.
Okay. I guess mine would have been, what would mine have been? Ham.
Probably.
I put two and two together,
and it was good because the guy, I will tell you this, and then we'll kind of leave it alone. The guy that gave me the nickname from my Vietnam days didn't get to come home.
Oh, okay.
So that nickname became very important when Rib, his RPB hit a mine.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
he didn't come home.
Wow. So it's got special meaning to you, obviously.
Yeah, very much so, David.
Okay. Well, that gives it more special meaning to me, too.
Well, the Statesville people that my dad ran a business for 40 years. He had Park Place greenhouses in Statesville. And some of your older people that listen to your radio show might remember Park Place greenhouses on Broad Street.
Okay. Park Place greenhouses.
Yep, right
on
up
Broad
from
Street.
the tennis courts.
So, okay, Broad Street this way down near the tennis courts,
East Broad.
near the cemetery.
Yes, sir. Right
there.
across. Mm-hmm. Right across from there.
Okay.
I'm proud of that heritage.
So you've been around this area for a while.
I'm native.
Yeah.
And there aren't many natives from around here.
Yeah. Well, you got a Native American area here.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, that particular piece was made for me. I'm part native, and I'm told to be part native, and that is an antique arrowhead, and it was made for me by a Lakota Sioux, who was a very good friend of mine. His name was Joe Hawk.
Okay.
And I learned a lot of my native heritage from Mr. Hawk. And he made that for me. And he did things like that were very special for me. And he's with the Lord now.
Okay.
So
Well,
he's
that's-
waiting for me.
Yeah, very
But
good.
I like wearing his stuff.
Sure. Yeah. So that one's not 6,000 years old. Obviously not.
His
The Rock is.
His people out west, being Lakota Sioux, knew where the ancients of ancients hunted buffalo, and he knew where those things were, and his relatives did, and they would go dig.
Sure.
And when they would find things like this, they would send them to Joe. He was a knife maker and a master engraver, and I have some of his work. But he and I became very good friends.
All right.
And,
All right. So you bought that piece of property out in my buddy Jim Eisenheimer's, and have you found anything there yet?
hadn't had enough occasion to be out there, David.
Okay.
I've found little hoof prints for some white-tailed deer, and I've seen some nice wild turkey. And all of you folks that are out there, don't come out to my place and come with any kind of guns, because those are my pet deer.
Yes, I understand.
My pet turkeys.
Yeah, for sure. I couldn't shoot anything if I tried. I just can't do it.
Well, I used to do that a long time ago, but
Yeah.
that was before this part of my life.
The way I look at the Native American artifacts, they were, 15,000 years ago, they were here, 14,000 thereabouts, And you look at all those years, there's still artifacts everywhere.
Yes, there are.
That's what they used. They used it for their living.
We probably, how can I be nice and say that European people desecrated the Native American people in this land, and we should have never done a lot of stuff that we did.
Pretty much wiped out a lot of the history that they had. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Covered up the lands.
How'd we get on that now?
I don't know, but we could talk about that. Listen, that's one of my other passions is history. So we could definitely talk about the history.
We could talk about that for a while.
Yes, but we'll do that later on though, because I guess we're here to talk about your career and your racing and that kind of stuff. But my wife Traci's here to my right, of course. I say of course, meaning that she's here, as you can see in the camera. And we got our young Bryson over here. I like calling him young Bryson.
It's good to be young.
Which he is.
It's good to be young.
Yeah, there you go. He is just a mere 17. I guess when was your birthday?
August 30th.
Oh,
so
now did we miss that?
I don't know. I may have been.
I told you happy birthday.
Traci did. And you did too. I'm pretty
I did
sure you
too.
did. I can't remember.
Yeah, it must not have been on the show though.
No. It was it was kind of in the middle of the week. So.
Because up until last month, I was still calling you 16.
Yeah, it's okay.
Yeah, okay.
It's all good.
Well, good. I'm
not
glad
much different. I don't feel much different, so it's all good.
It's not. Hey, Blue, do you 16 and 17-year-old young? I mean,
Bryson,
yes.
If he's calling you young, does that mean he's old?
Yeah.
I would say so, maybe. I'm just kidding. No,
Wait a minute, I can say that, but not you.
Now
I'm
Traci
kidding.
is young because you can look at her and you can see
Yeah.
she's young. But now I don't know about David.
Listen, I married an older woman.
Do what?
I married an older woman.
You just robbed the cradle. That's what you did.
Yeah. Okay, fine. All right.
David's gonna get all embarrassed now.
No, I'm good. I'm good. I'm just happy to be here. Happy to be doing the show. You know, if you haven't heard of our show, it's every Monday evening at 7:00. We hear a new guest from the racing world tell us their story, their path, their racing roots. Is basically how it goes. And every once in a while, we'll talk about history and artifacts and Bryson and being young and all that kind of stuff.
Well, I was one of the lucky ones.
Yes.
Because when I was a wet behind the ears kid, I got to be schooled by the Holman-Moody people that were gathered up by Ralph Moody. And Mr. Moody, after the split between John Holman and himself, put together a team that built race engines on Ashley Road in the Gene White Tire building. And this was a select group of guys.
The Gene White Tower building. Okay, can you explain exactly where that is? I went to high school on Ashley Road. I went to Harding High School.
Okay. When you would, Harding.
Yes.
Start at Harding High School. If you came up the road from Harding and turned on Ashley Road to the left to go down to Freedom Drive,
Yes.
At that point, the building that is now U-Haul, that was the Gene White Tire building.
Okay.
And it was one of these things that was, I don't know what the NASCAR connection was, but of course, Mr. Moody, having all the connections that he had, this was the building that he picked out to put together this select group of people that went with him from Holman and Moody. And those guys, I mean, they had, it was an amazing group of guys. They were just, led by Waddell Wilson. And Mr. Wilson and all of the guys around him had no idea that they were teaching us so much stuff. And years and years later, it came to pass that some of them realized it, some of them did, and there were I can name names and of iconic people along with Mr. Wilson that worked under the leadership of Mr. Wilson, and these were just great guys, just the greatest bunch of guys you could ever hope to meet, and people that probably were in the background, that some of your some of the people that listen to your radio show might not have ever heard of people like Ira Sanders or Bud Allman or Keith Russell or some of these guys that did a whole lot, in the engine shop. Mm-hmm. And,
Pete Taylor was one.
Well, Pete Taylor was before Mr. Wilson.
Oh, yeah.
He went back into the 50s.
Okay.
And Mr. Taylor mentored me. And Pete had left Holman and Moody before Mr. Wilson showed up. Okay. And I'm hoping that I can remember some more of these names for you.
Yeah.
But Mr. Taylor is with the Lord now. But he mentored me for so many years, and just like Mr. Moody, Mr. and Ms. Moody sort of took me on as a project. And I was just a young kid, and didn't know anything. I knew a lot about street cars, but I didn't know anything about race cars. Yeah. And Ralph and Mitzi were very, very religious people. They were Catholic, and they supported a lot of programs at St. Anne's Catholic Church over off Park Road. And Mr. Moody would bring in cars from his congregation over there, and we'd fix them. And it was part of the program over there.
Okay.
And if he wanted, there were several times that he had some of us underneath motorhomes. And I don't know this to be a true fact, but I have been told that Ralph Moody drove a Winnebago Chieftain around Charlotte Motor Speedway at 85 miles an hour. Mm-hmm. Now, I've been told, and I don't think anybody else has ever done that.
Sure.
But that was one of the stories that I've heard. And but Ralph was a fantastic individual. He really was.
Yeah, that was the you were telling me about that room. It was the clean. Was that the clean room? You had Bud Allman in there as well.
Bud was the machinist, and anything that went in the machine room had already been cleaned. Okay. And so Bud was outside of the clean room, and Ira Sanders was out there. And, at that point in time, they still had freeze plugs or Welsh plugs in the raw blocks that came in. And so they would drill holes and tap and put in plugs to make sure that none of the Welsh plugs would come out. They would clean out all the holes. They would grind off all the rough edges. And there was once in a while they'd get behind, and some of us guys would get an opportunity to go over there and do some of the roughing work and stuff like that. If Mr. Wilson ever found out about that, he probably wouldn't have liked it too much.
Oh, yeah.
But Bud was he built a lot of the jigs that he used to do things with the pistons for the deck heights and things like that Mr. Wilson needed to get the compression ratios and things the way he wanted them.
What was his name again?
Bud Allman.
Okay, Bud Allman, yeah.
Yeah.
So I always hear about, there was a lot of other Allman brothers.
Yeah, there were.
That worked in racing.
Thurman Young was a name that I hadn't mentioned, and Thurman worked in the clean room, and he and Keith Russell worked side by side. And Thurman was one of the quiet, he very non-assuming, but he went around, he did his work, and nobody would even know he was there, to be truthful, if you didn't know, what he was doing. And he would take time off the clock when he wasn't on somebody's job. And they'd clock in on a job for whatever, race car that they were working on, whether it was Mr. DeWitt or whether it was Bobby Allison or whoever they were working for. And if it's Mr. Parsons' car or Mr. Allison's car or several of the other independents that came through the shop. And we'd know just enough to be dangerous, you might say. And, there were some things that we did. There were some really crazy things, that specialty stuff, things that nobody's ever heard of before, that Ralph had us doing. And some of the things, there's nothing secret about any of that kind of stuff. But I think everybody's probably heard about the Panteras that came through Holman and Moody, and they were specialty sports cars that got shipped from Italy. But very few people have ever heard of the DHammiam Mangusta. And this was a prototype.
Bless you.
And it had double gull wings, the doors and the engine covers.
Okay.
And there was a doctor in Florida that wanted more horsepower. So he sent this thing up, and it had a 289 high performance in it as a prototype car. He wanted more horsepower, so somewhere Ralph found a 351 that, the Boss engines were totally different engines than anything else. This wasn't just a 302 inch, 351 engine. It was a Boss engine. And they removed that 289, and two mechanics left the shop trying to get that sucker in that car.
Oh, wow.
And I was the last one to work on that car.
Okay.
I was the last one to work on the Mangusta. And when I finished it, I went into Ralph's office and laid the keys down and told Ralph that I was finished with the car. And he said, "No, you're not quite finished yet. You need to test drive this car because this car is going to Florida. And I want to make sure that everything's, because you didn't do all this." So I had to drive that car around. Can you imagine driving a prototype car around Charlotte, North Carolina? Scared me to death.
Yeah.
I was a little wet behind the ears kid.
I was going to ask if you were like, oh, darn, I have to drive this thing.
I was shaking.
Yeah.
And, there's different little, things for the electric fans and all that kind of stuff. So I brought it back at the end of the week, and I laid the keys down, and Ralph said, "Is it ready?" And I said, "Yeah." And I said, "Okay, come on." And I made a mistake. I got in the passenger seat of a car that had all kinds of horsepower. And I strapped myself in, and we went out on Interstate 85. And the next thing I knew, we were going down Interstate 85, and the telephone poles looked like a picket fence.
Oh, wow. Yes, I'm sure.
And Mr. Ralph was sitting over there, and he was laughing, and he was having the best time, and we weren't out of third gear.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And that Linko had 5 gears in it. So anyway, I got back, and when I got out of that car, I said to myself, never again.
Never again.
Never again.
Hey, put those headphones on.
Okay. All right.
All right. Hey there. Is this?
How are you?
Is this good? Is this the legendary Waddell Wilson, the Hall of Famer?
Just me. That's it.
There you go.
Hello, Mr. Wilson. This is Blue Weber.
How's Blue Weber doing today, my friend?
Oh, I'm wonderful. It's great to get to talk to you, Mr. Wilson. I'm telling on you a little bit, too.
Well, you don't need to do that. I'm not working.
Oh, man. Oh, there were so much stuff that you and the guys in the engine shop taught us. And I've told you this at church before, that just by example, you fellas taught us so much, Mr. Wilson, and we're all, so grateful for all the stuff that y'all did.
Well, we all work together, doing a lot of things.
That's true. That's true. But not only did you teach us stuff in the shop, but you gave us the example, as a fine person, to walk through life as. And everybody didn't get that, Mr. Wilson. And I'm very grateful. Very grateful.
Well, I looked at you as an outstanding person, too, I never seen everything I've seen about you was A+. I'm being as honest as I can be, too, saying that.
Well, I thank you, sir. But, you used to try to sneak around me when you came into church, because you'd sneak around and go on up to the balcony, and I wouldn't see you come in and get to say hey to you.
I don't remember sneaking around.
Well, I got to catch up with you a couple times, but you knew that I was taking care of my job as the operations minister, so I think you were just leaving me alone.
Right.
You were just leaving me alone. We were talking about some of the stuff that used to go on at the little store and the little shop. I told them about the Mangusta car. Do you remember that car that came from Florida?
Somewhat I do, yeah.
The red car. And, you know, I made the mistake of going for a ride with Ralph in that car. I made the mistake. Okay, now that I get to talk to you, is it true that Ralph drove that Chieftain motorhome around Charlotte Motor Speedway? Is that a true story?
Yeah.
See
Yeah,
there,
he done
David?
that. I tell you, the first time I got in the car with him and not realizing how crazy he was in a vehicle was at Milwaukee, and he picked us up at the airport. And I'm gonna tell you one thing: he took us for a ride on everything.
Oh my goodness! Well, now I'm going to tell a little bit more on you, if you don't mind. You know, Mr. Wilson really didn't enjoy driving too much. And before I had to leave because the money got tight when the races got short, Mr. Wilson was trying to groom me to be his driver. And wasn't it 2 races that I drove you to, Waddell? It was somewhere around Rockingham. And anyway, I think it was a couple races. And, you know, when Mr. Wilson got there, he had to jump out of the car and immediately start crewing with Bobby Allison's car. And, you know, I didn't know what was going on. I was just the guy that drove Mr. Wilson to the track. And boy, did I learn some stuff in those days, Mr. Wilson.
There was a lot going on back then.
Oh, that was fun.
Different from today.
What Blue was telling us about the 1973, we were talking about the Rockingham wreck, you know, with when y'all had to rebuild that car for Benny. Tell us a little bit about that.
That was amazing.
Well, you were still on the track with Mr. Allison's car, weren't you, Mr. Wilson?
Yeah, but I was on with him, but I didn't. I best I remember then I wasn't changing tires like I normally did. But I remember, whenever I had that and see that guy that we'd built an engine for and everything fell out of the race. I think he just parked it. We went down there and got down and cut them door bars out of it.
Well,
without an okay.
Do you remember now I'm going to shake your memory a little bit, Waddell. Do you remember Elmer Buxton and the Buxton Racing Team? That was the car that Ralph pulled up behind Benny's car and told all of us, take everything off of this car and put it on Benny's car and put it back out there on the racetrack while the race was going on.
Yeah.
And
it done that. Yeah, that's true. NASCAR wouldn't let Benny back on the racetrack until he had door bars in.
Where did you get the door bars from?
The donor car.
Okay.
Cut them out of it.
Cut them out and welded them back in.
Yeah.
And what were some of the roll cage that we had to weld in?
Yeah, that's what it was, part of the roll cage.
Oh, okay.
Oh, I bet he wasn't real happy.
Well, I think Mr. Moody owned more of that car than Elmer Buxton did by that time, wasn't it, Mr. Wilson?
Well, the guy, he wasn't there to even ask him if that was okay. Just took it on their own to go get. That was the only car that was out of the race.
Well, I don't think that car ever made the race.
And Benny's car was sitting there and just cut the stuff out of it and put it in. Richie Bars was involved in it, too. He done a lot of the welding.
Oh, yeah. I was up underneath the car because some of the rear end had been messed up. And so I was underneath there, and Thurman Young was sort of ramrodding things, and he was telling us kids, do this and do that and do the other. And it's monkey see, monkey do. And that's pretty well the way that deal came down. I remember some other things that I could jog your memory, but I don't know if I want to. Do you remember?
Yeah, but let's finish that story, about being in that car, because if we hadn't got him back in that race, see, that clinched the championship for him. And if we hadn't, then we'd have lost. Benny would have lost the championship.
Yeah.
How about that?
That was my only claim to fame, Mr. Wilson. I got to be part of that crew.
Yeah. So you ended up winning a championship that year, and then you also won the Daytona 500 a couple years later, but you ended up using some parts from the engine, well, from the year before. If you don't
That
mind.
still blows my mind that happened. That was one thing that was not supposed to even come close to happening. When you win the Daytona 500 in under those conditions, that is rare as rare could ever be.
Well, I remember that was something that you were so proud of, Mr. Wilson. That was
iconic. You know, we in '74, you know, that's when we had them downsized to a 358, 364 cubic inch, and that aftermarket didn't have any good parts and pieces. Just, you know, Chevrolet parts and pieces, all we could get a hold of. And we blowed up a bunch of engines, and then we ended up building that engine that Benny had them pistons the guy gave me in California, and told him them would work. When he brought them in, I said, that's drag race pistons. They make a quarter mile, but they don't make it 500 miles. So we built it, and he just 2 laps with it, and it blowed up. And then that piece of junk that I built, I wouldn't give you $200 for it. And I wouldn't even unload his pit equipment that day. But anyway, come down there next to the end, and I was like, dang, what cubic inch is that thing? Because we had 364 to start with, and what it was is changing the crankshaft, or a 358, but then they'd gone back to 358, and you couldn't be 364. And what I built that engine, when he took the lead, it dawned on me, what did I build it out of? I was just finding anything that would work to make an engine, just make a noise. And that thing run 500 miles and wins the Daytona 500. Get out of here.
Well, you know, there were several engines that came through the shop that Thurman and Peter Dabb used to work on, and you couldn't find parts for them, and you'd have to go through the bearings and things like that and find stuff that you could use. I remember some of those things too, Mr. Wilson.
Yeah, that was pretty common doing things like that back in the day, finding something that worked.
And some of those raw blocks that came in, I remember Ira Sanders, he might spend 2 or 3 days deburring those things.
Yeah, they were a mess.
Yeah, they were rough. And then you had to try to straighten out all of the stuff in the shop, because the cylinders wouldn't be straight, the crankshaft line bore wouldn't be straight. It was just all over the place.
Yeah, there's a lot of work to do in making those things work. I know that. A lot of work. A lot of extra work it shouldn't have been.
Well, you know, I'm going to let you talk for a little bit, Waddell. David, I'm going to sit in the back.
I'm not a big talker.
Oh, it's fine. Bill Blair called me just before the show there, and I talked to him for a little bit, and he talked a little bit about Pete Taylor, because he was on his show, being employee.
Who was that again?
Pete Taylor. Bill Blair. I talked to him before the show. He called me a little bit ago.
Bill Blair?
Yes, sir.
Oh, yeah. What a guy.
Oh, yeah. Bill's great.
You know, Mr. Taylor worked out at Holman and Moody before you were out there, wasn't it?
Right.
Mr. Wilson?
He did.
And he was the first person hired for Holman and Moody. His employment number was 01. And Mr. Taylor mentored me after, I had to leave because the money was gone. You remember having that meeting in the shop, and Mr. Moody said, well, we're just not making enough money to keep everybody on the payroll. And I don't think you liked me leaving too much, because you were just getting me trained. Yeah, you were just training me up, and you didn't like that too well.
No, I didn't like it at all.
But, it was logical for me to leave because I was the one that had the most streetcar experience. And the rest of the guys in that shop, Waddell, the only thing they'd ever done was racing. And
I know.
And so you had to lose me. And the only thing I asked was to have a job when we got finished with that, they called it a fuel economy run, and it was for Ford Motor Company.
Oh, yeah.
But and they did right by me. They gave me a job, But I had about 6 cars and a 500-gallon gas tank when all of that, everybody was standing in line waiting for gasoline, Waddell.
I remember that deal. That was horrible.
Yeah, it was. And, you and I used to you'd have your racing stuff over there at the distributor machine, and I'd have some streetcar stuff over there, and you'd have to get done with your racing stuff before I could turn the distributors for the streetcars. And you'd have you remember, now I'm going to remind you of something. You remember how hard you used to massage those Holly carburetors? And you'd put in hours of hard work on those carburetors for people. And then one day you found out that the carburetors that I was building for the street cars for Ralph, they were charging out the money for as much money as you were getting for the race car carburetors. You remember that?
No, I remember doing it, but I don't remember the money part of it.
Yeah. That was when Ron Granna was writing the tickets. I didn't need to remind you of that, did I? You can go ahead and laugh.
Yes. You're probably hearing names he hadn't heard in a little while.
Oh, I'm sure
In a
of
minute.
that.
Hey, Waddell, I do have a question for you, though. If you remember Walter Ballard.
Oh, yeah.
1971 Rookie of the Year, where his son's listening, and he tunes in every week, and his Stoney Ballard, and he teaches high school. He teaches mechanics down in Florida. So I was thinking
Wow.
it would be cool. Yeah, it would be cool if you could give us some advice I call them Stoney's kids. That's pretty good, ain't it? If you could give some advice to them if they want to get into either NASCAR or just being a great mechanic.
Well, the way it's going right now, I believe I'd just be a great mechanic because, a lot of those guys are getting laid off, and they
Sure.
wouldn't be in, no really no openings now, and then you'd have to have all the experience in the world to be able to think about getting hired.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a tough road to go down that road, but I'd hate to even think about getting involved in it now anyway because they took the mechanics out of it. All it is parts changers now.
Right. Yeah.
So,
Mm-hmm. Well,
and you ain't older than any of them either. Better not.
Yeah. True.
Okay, David, it also depends upon who's teaching you.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Now, I'm going to remind Mr. Wilson of something else. I'll do it quick. Mr. Wilson, you were running a fellowship over at Mr. Hendrick's race team. And one of my kids applied for that fellowship, and you interviewed him. And Eddie Thomas won that fellowship and worked out at UNCC.
Right.
And Eddie and Freddie, your son, got to be friends.
Oh, yeah.
And with your influence and with their, working together out there, the end result, and I think you know this, but Eddie Thomas went from being one of the kids that I trained to tuning open-wheel Honda Indy cars now all over the world. So
I knew he'd gone on up doing things. I didn't know he was doing that good. Wow.
he's you remember him? He's such a great Christian young man.
Oh, yeah. He was a good boy. I mean, he was very smart, too. Very smart individual.
Well, I was so happy when he applied, with you and you interviewed him. And I think he had his basics down pretty good from working with me. And then when he got to you and got an engineering degree, and when you said what you just said, if there's any advice, these young guys need their education. They need to have a real education.
Yeah, that's what I believe Stoney gives them, that real education. He says not the way I teach, but teaching them exactly the right way to do stuff, how to diagnose things, and how to not just be a parts replacer.
Well, I got lucky because I got to be around Mr. Wilson and the people that he put together in a race team.
Yeah.
And that was just such a wonderful place to be.
And look how much that multiplied throughout the whole racing community. All the people, you talk to a lot of people now and they say, I used to work at Holman-Moody, or, my dad worked there or whatever. And they just went on to be the greatest in racing. So,
Hello.
yeah. There you go. That's why Mr. Waddell Wilson's in the NASCAR Hall of Fame
Yes, sir.
as a crew chief, engine builder, and all that good stuff.
And I got to work with him back in the early
You did.
70s.
You did. That's great.
And that was that was just more than any young man. The Lord blessed me so well to have that. There's nothing I could say that could ever tell Mr. Wilson how much that meant to me for my entire career. That was great. Thurman Young, Peter Dabb, all those guys. It's just a wonderful group of guys. Mr. Wilson, you want me to remind you of a few other things? Is Waddell still on?
Hey, Waddell, you still there? Might have lost him somehow.
I think we lost Mr. Wilson.
Okay. Well, all right. There we go. There was Waddell Wilson that called in, and somehow we lost him, I guess. Anyway, that happens. It's happened before. It just cuts out. Actually, Jack Rouse was on the line with us, and eventually it was like we were still talking to him and telling him stories, and then all of a sudden he was gone. Yeah, yeah.
We lost him, yeah.
Yeah, so there you go. But that was Waddell Wilson, as I mentioned, he's a NASCAR Hall of Famer. I don't remember what class, but, he deserves to be there. He won, gosh.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
If there was a Hall of Fame for being a mentor and a supreme individual training us young kids, he ought to be in that Hall of Fame too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there you go.
Absolutely.
Right.
And I was there.
So if you were, yeah, I guess that would be your advice to the kids, to Stoney's kids. What would you say? What would you tell them? I mean, I guess you kind of did already.
Well, yeah, education is the key.
Yeah.
Education is the key. And the more that you can get into an engineering background, if you want to be involved in this kind of stuff, in the let's say the 50s, if you wanted to go sweep floors and work your way up, maybe you could do that. That's not the way the world is anymore.
Right.
You've got to know what it takes when you walk in the door.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think I'm speaking out of place when I say that.
Oh, absolutely not.
Even though my forte was street performance engines. And to be very truthful, David, I wouldn't let people with true performance engines in my shop. If you wanted to go racing, I wasn't where you needed to be.
Tell our listeners about your background and your ASE certifications and stuff.
Well, that's some of the stuff that I did that I'm kind of proud of. I am an ASE certified master engine machinist, and I worked as a consultant for ASE doing test questions for over 25 years. And I have a medallion that I was told by ASE that there were less than 12 of those out. And I'm sort of proud of that. And those guys used to really like to travel, so they would take us all over the United States. And I got to see a lot of places with ASE that I would not have gotten to travel, but we would do test questions. And we went through a good period of time, and there were I guess there were 20, 25 of us on the board. And we'd get together and we'd go over test questions and, well, does it apply in all circumstances, or is this just something that would be one or two things or something? And it had to apply to everything. Mm-hmm. So a lot of questions got shot down and have to be rewritten or have to be thrown out. But it was a phenomenal group of guys, and I got to be a part of that. My forte into that was the small engine machine shops. Now, we had people that came to the board from General Motors, from Ford Motor Company, and from Chrysler, and they sat at the same table that we did. But Dave Milne was the guy that ran all of that, and he said that he wanted the small shop represented through that era of time. And Automotive Engine Rebuilders Association also sent, a delegate to sit on the board of that, and it was, you know, you people asked me back in those days, where did y'all come up with these questions? You know, and I'd say, well, you know, if you're a mechanic, you're not going to pass test for an engine machinist. That isn't going to happen, because you're going to have had engine machining experience.
Yeah, it's a whole separate entity.
Yeah.
It's a whole separate thing.
The mechanics, because they like to, you know, I shouldn't say this, but they like to collect ASE certifications.
Right.
That they collected them like trade cards, and some of them were extremely intelligent. But if you actually got a machinist certification, you were doing pretty doggone good. And if you got all three of the cylinder head, cylinder block, and engine assembly, you know, certifications, you were a master engine machinist. And you weren't just a mechanic, you were a machinist, and you knew what you were doing in the shop.
Yeah, right.
And once again, I had the great experience of being around a lot of people that knew what they were doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Sure did. Sounds like it. And let's take a quick break, and we'll be right back to Racing Roots with Hamm. We got to pay some bills. We'll be right back.
It's time to fire up the grill with only the best from Gibson Farms Market. Stop in and pick up the best meat in town. All of their meat is USDA certified grass-fed and the best meat you'll ever eat. They have a huge selection of steaks, hamburgers, sausage, brats, ribs, chops, and so much more. And while you're there, check out all of the locally grown and produced products like fresh milk from Homestead and Riverbend Creamery, homemade bread, cakes and pies, fresh produce, Ashe County cheese, and a store full more. It's only at Gibson Farms Market, 165 Jennings Road in Statesville, Tuesday through Friday 10 till 6:30 and Saturday 10 till 3. Hey friends, Billy Buck here, and you know the weather's finally turned cooler for us, and now's the perfect time to have that new irrigation system or lighting installed at your home. Maybe you're a local contractor or a builder, and you're looking for someone to work with on your building projects. Well, you can trust our friends at Lakeview Lighting and Irrigation for all your irrigation and lighting needs. Residential or commercial, fully licensed and insured. Lakeview Lighting and Irrigation. For more information, visit the website at lakeviewli.com or call 704-929-0729. Lakeview, a division of Boggs Landscaping, LLC. Hey, have you been craving some good down-home cooking? Well, then our friends at Sharp's Catering and Homemade Meals are for you. Now, I know it's crazy to say, but Thanksgiving and Christmas are just around the corner, and the folks at Sharp's are ready to cater your party, your meal, your fun get-together, whatever it is. The folks at Sharp's can make a meal for you that's just perfect. Give them a call at 704-546-5700. I'll get that to you again. Sharp's Catering does all the work for you. Once again, that's 704-546-5700. Visit Sharp's Catering, open Monday through Friday, 11 a.m. to 8 p.m. at 107 Grove Street in beautiful Harmony for your next special occasion.
Real Country 550 and 92.9 WAME.
And we're back to Racing Roots with Hamm, and we've got Mr. Blue Weber in with us this evening. And if you missed the call, we had Waddell Wilson called in. That was great to talk to him, as always, and listen to his infinite amount of knowledge. Great guy. I guess the call must have dropped or whatever, but that happens here on our show. But we got a lot of good comments coming in from our friends on the YouTubes, and Bryson has one from, well, maybe you got one anywhere.
I do have one, and it's I'm not exactly sure what he's talking about, but it's from this one's from Ron Argerbright. Okay, he says, do you feel like the wreck on Sunday with Cole Custer's car was on purpose? And then he says it happened with Michael Waltrip team, and the playoff money is the goal.
What's your thoughts on that, Bryson?
Yeah, so I don't really know exactly what the incident with Cole Custer was on Sunday.
I missed that. That's Ron the snack guy's talking to us, so
yeah.
Maybe he can elaborate on that.
Yeah, let me know about that, because I watched it. Well, I was at the race on Sunday, and I have no idea what he's talking about. But there was so much going on. It was the road, a lot of things are happening around the track. So, why don't maybe tell me what that wreck is, or I'll do some research over here and get back with you.
Yeah, there you go. And we can come back to that.
Give some input and some
All
conversation.
right. And that was on what platform was that on?
That was on LinkedIn. So,
Okay.
Yes.
Because we're streaming on Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, and LinkedIn, and YouTube.
And
So-
YouTube's what I monitor.
Yes.
And we did have a comment come through Stoney Ballard. It says Sherman, but it's Stoney. He says that if you're ASE, you rock. That's the hardest master to achieve. That's the one David was saying. He teaches in Florida.
Oh, okay.
So
Well,
he's
thank
giving
you.
you kudos.
Yeah.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Stoney Ballard, which is Sherman Ballard on YouTube.
That's what I said, yeah.
Yeah. That's Walter Ballard's son. The 1971 Rookie of the Year.
Right.
Yeah. They're going to come on the show in November.
Well, now you got to remember, I'm an old guy, and some of this stuff that's new age stuff, and some of the stuff that they do now, it's Greek to me. And when you start talking to me about some of the old guys, that especially the old Holman-Moody guys, like Mr. Wilson and Pete Taylor and Larry Wallace, and some of the iconic people that came out of Holman-Moody. Now, we can talk about them.
Yeah.
Because these are personal friends of mine.
Right.
And, of course, I did talk to Mr. Wallace, and Larry is still grinding camshafts at Holman and Moody.
You talked to
He
him
will
today?
turn 85 this next week.
Wow, that's
And
crazy.
he is still grinding camshafts.
Good for him.
So we were down at Lee. We saw Lee Holman. It's been about, 6 months ago maybe.
It's been a while.
And I saw some of those fresh ground cams sitting there on the table. And we were like, it must have been Larry Wallace cams.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
yeah. As a matter of fact, I asked Larry when we talked if Lee had given him an opportunity to have a young guy to teach to run the Storm Vulcan cam grinders. There's two of them down at Holman Moody, and no one has picked it up.
Oh, okay.
And I don't know how that's going to play in years to come.
Wow, yeah. Because
Mr. Wallace, just like me, we don't live forever. We're going to get to go home one of these days.
Yeah.
And
maybe I should start driving down there.
Well, Larry's a champion guy. He's just salt of the earth guy.
Yeah.
And we all have our medical issues these days, because when you get to be over 70 years old, the body starts failing whether the mind still works or not. But Larry's mind is just as good as it ever was. And when we were putting together the engine, the 428 engine for Ralph's car, the Talladega, Torino that Ralph used to drive, his street car.
Yes.
Larry ground the cam for that for me. They had a double A grind, and Pete Taylor did the balance work for that engine. I tried to include as many of the old Holman and Moody guys building that engine for that car. And when Ralph Moody Jr., who has the car, called me and he said, "Okay, Blue, it's if you will you put Dad's engine together?" And so I went through the process of putting that 428 together, and it was in such terrible shape because that car sat underneath the carport over on Park Road, where Ralph and Mitzi lived for a long time over there, and they had to move because the road went right through where their house was. And when I took the valve cover off of the engine, Ford, that was imprinted on the metal valve cover, was imprinted on rust underneath the valve cover. It was terrible. It was terrible.
Yeah.
But we restored that engine, and I got a text that was Little Ralph had built a jig, and I call him Little Ralph, and I'm allowed to do that. Ralph Jr. built a jig. He is an engineer of the highest degree, and he had built a jig to crank that engine. and I delivered it to him, and he cranked it up, and he sent me a video. And he cranked that car up, no, not the car, the engine, out of the car, and I got to hear that thing run.
Oh, okay, on his running stand that he has.
That was wonderful. That was great. I hope that car is someday good. It's an iconic car, and I'm not absolutely sure that what I'll tell you is correct, but the story I was told about that Torino was that was called a partition car. And it was sent to Holman and Moody, put together with pop rivets. And they disassembled that car to build the panels for the race cars that they ran at the Talladega until they were outlawed.
Well, that makes sense. Okay.
And so when all of that was over with and they outlawed the car, Ralph called Ford and said, "What do you want me to do with this?" And they said, "Throw it away."
Oh.
Well, Ralph said, "Yeah."
Not happening.
And,
yes.
And, when it was shipped, the way I understand it, Ford didn't ship it with an engine and transmission or a title. And the story I was told is that Ralph said, "I'd really like to have this car." So they sent him a title and the 428 that was in it, and a C6 transmission, and I think some other things. And they put the car together, and that was Ralph's street car for a long time.
Okay.
And it would, when we were at Ashley Road, it would, I'm going to tell you this, and I hope somebody's listening that could imagine this. When Ralph and Mitzi would pull into the shop, Ralph would get out of the driver's door, and it was a Torino, 2-door car. Mitzi would get out of the passenger door, and Grandma and Mitzi's sister and Ann and Ralph Jr. would all pile out of the back of that car. It was a show.
Wow.
And
I bet. So I had a back seat.
when they would pull in.
Is there anybody on the line?
Unload. That was great.
Remember last week when the phones were acting up?
That did that to me on Thursday night.
Did
as
it
well.
really? Yeah. So if you did call back. But
we had a caller on Thursday.
Yeah.
And then I thought we kept having more, but it kept
lines.
coming on, and then, I don't know. Weird.
Okay. Yeah. Well,
same situation.
all right then. Well, that car. Okay. I wonder if Tracy's dad worked on that car at all. If he knew anything about it at Holman and Moody.
I have no idea,
We'll
but
have
I
to
think
ask him.
Dad's watching, so you can
Yeah.
ask him.
The
Mr.
last
Kinney.
time I saw the car, it was at Ralph Jr.'s home in his garage.
Right. I just wondered. I'd never heard the story about it coming in riveted together like that just to use the panels to build
Now,
the race cars.
You got to remember, this is the story that I was told.
Well, yeah, it makes sense too, though.
Yeah.
Because how else would they just send the panels, and then say?
Well, there
"Here,
were other
roll this out."
iconic things that came through the shop over on Ashley Road. Pritchard Paint and Glass had a Bronco, one of the old squared up, early 60s or mid 60s. And it had a 6-cylinder engine in it, and they wanted horsepower. So Ralph came up with an engine somewhere that we didn't build that engine, but we put that engine in that Ford Bronco, and that was the craziest. I don't know how much horsepower was in that thing, but it was crazy.
Yeah.
And when they picked it up, and they wanted to see if the 4-wheel drive stuff would still work. They locked the hubs on that thing and all over the place with all 4 wheels.
You could probably spin all 4 wheels at the same time.
Oh yeah.
Easily.
It was crazy.
Wow. Tracy, you had some comments coming in. That's all.
Yeah. I kind of sort of went over the ones that I got, but someone just asked if they had mentioned that Ralph Moody was basically a designer of the Talladega Torino. That was a comment.
Oh, no, we haven't talked about that. The Talladega Torino. I mean, as far as him being a designer of it.
I don't know that I can address that for you, David.
Yeah. Okay.
I do know that out of the at that time back in those days, there was a lot of stuff that Mr. Ralph did that was through Ford Motor Company. he had contacts through Ford Motor Company that I don't think anybody else did.
Okay.
And when it came down to the races being shortened and the money wasn't as good, and somebody needed to leave the shop, and that's how I got out of the race shop. I went to work at a dealer development center, teaching people how to drive economically, to be truthful. That was, they call it a fuel economy run.
Okay.
And the dealership was a Burr Lincoln Mercury out on Independence Boulevard, Charlotte. But
Hammer down, mash the gas, and pass.
no, it was
that
keep
way.
your foot off the pedal and look at the gauge that I put on your dash, because it was, the more you push down on the pedal, and the more vacuum that gauge dropped down, the less fuel mileage you were going to get. But those were some iconic days.
Right. Yeah. One of the things that we didn't bring up, and I wanted to ask Waddell about, and I mentioned it to him, that before, whenever I got him to sign his book, the Waddell Wilson's book.
Yeah.
And I know you had said you had a copy of it at one time.
Yeah, I did.
I don't mean to bring that back up, but
It got stolen.
Yeah.
In 1993, my shop in the west side of Charlotte got broken into, and the police department said probably on a Friday night, and they actually beat a hole in the foundation of the building.
Wow.
That's how they got around my security system. And the police department said these people probably spent Friday night, Saturday night, and Sunday night. When I came in Monday morning, I didn't even have a hand wrench. And they stole everything out of my office. They stole anything that they could get their hands on.
Wow.
Through a hole about this big. But the idea of that is that all of the machine shops in Charlotte started backing pickup trucks to my loading dock, and they started unloading toolboxes. Said, we don't use these anymore. This is doubles to things we got. They would not allow me to be put out of business by thieves.
Yeah, that's very nice.
That was just the camaraderie of the people that were in machining.
Eventually you moved up to Mooresville.
Yeah, I did. My wife wanted me up there. We ran horse ranches. The horse ranch up in Mooresville was the one that I would talk about. We had we leased property up until we built that Fox Hollow Farm Ranch, and we've had as many as 40 horses in our care. But when we got over to Fox Hollow, we had about 20. And I'm now retired. I got an opportunity to buy some land from a friend of yours.
Yes.
Jim Meissenhammer was nice enough to let me buy some land, and I'm going to sit back on my porch and watch grass grow.
There you go. And watch the deer.
The machine shop was bought by a fella, Ben Haig, bought my shop. And he is Bluefield Antique Auto Machine, and he named it that in appreciation of me. And so the Bluefield comes from my name.
Okay.
And that was nice of Ben to do that.
That is.
But he has some phenomenal stuff.
Does he have horses too?
And he has old 30s, 40s race cars that they take out to Bonneville, and they run some races out there with the old antique cars, and some of those cars have bionic horsepower. Fantastic stuff. So I'll throw a pitch in for him.
Yeah, well, that sounds good. That sounds kind of like my buddies over at the garage shop. They do that too. They go out to the Bonneville Salt Flats. And
that's a big deal.
Yeah.
That's a huge deal. But I'm real proud of those guys over there, and they take care of some of the community designs that they work on some tractors that need to be worked on, and every once in a while somebody will even sneak a car in there.
Okay. Did they do machine work?
I'm sorry?
They do machine work for outside people?
They bought my shop.
Well, I know that was a machine shop, but they do the cars too, but they do like customer machine work?
They do is nice and engine machine stuff on that stuff, and they sort of specialize in the old flatheads and that kind of stuff.
Okay.
Really really nice stuff. They don't necessarily, I mean, don't take one of the LS motors or anything like that over there and think that Ben's going to work on that, because that isn't going to happen.
Okay. Yeah.
That just isn't going to happen.
Yeah.
But, okay, I'll let you in on a secret, and if any of your listeners know my history, I'm going to let it out that I still have my 1965 Corvette.
All right.
And it has not gone away. I bought that car when I got back from overseas from the Navy, and it's in storage right now, but it still has a legal tag and insurance on it. And if I want to go over to Dick's and take it down off the rack and go right around, it's perfectly, But the original engine is sitting beside the car. And I sort of balanced that thing up and added to it. And the only thing about the car that's really neat is it's a 327, 350 horse car.
Okay.
And it's got a lot of the stuff like the side exhaust and the power steering and all that. But you don't want to hear all that. But people that know me know that I've had that car just about all of my driving life since I got back from service.
Yeah.
And I have not. Nobody's offered me enough money yet.
Sure.
Someday somebody might.
I don't know. I wonder if somebody offered you $1 million, if you'd take it.
I think that they'd buy themselves a car.
Yeah.
Well, there you go.
I'm not crazy.
Got a
David.
price tag.
Yeah.
I'll tell you this:
Yes.
if I didn't take it, my wife would probably have me hung.
Oh yeah. Well, $1 million, you can go buy yourself.
I can go buy a couple cars for that.
There you go.
But
Okay. Well, maybe the one listening is wanting it for that. They might offer you a deal. They might say, "Well, I'll give you $750,000 for it." Yes. Sold.
there's, there was one other car back from the days that we were over on Ashley Road. And if we've got enough time, I'll tell you about that car.
Yep.
Sunbeam Alpines were the little 4-cylinder cars. They were a little sports car, little tiny sports car. And a person as big as me couldn't drive that car. And the reason I couldn't drive that car, I could squeeze in it, but my feet, even barefoot, couldn't get to the pedals between the brake and the clutch and the accelerator. I couldn't drive that car. Well, one of the people from Ralph's church had bought one of those things that was called a Sunbeam Tiger. And the Tiger was outfitted with a Ford 260 V8. Well, this was a doctor, and this was going to be a gift to his son for his 16th birthday.
Wow.
And it was pretty rough when it showed up at the shop. And so Ralph said, okay, let's get this thing, all cleaned up and let's get this thing. And that 289 high performance you took out of the De Tomaso Mangusta, we're going to put that motor into this Sunbeam Tiger, and which proceeded to happen. Mm-hmm. And if you know the difference between a 289 and a 289 high performance, it's two animals of different colors, totally different engines. And there was absolutely nothing wrong with the engine. It was perfect. So we went to work on this thing, and when I say we, that's some of the stuff I got to do.
Yeah, good stuff. Cool stuff.
We got it ready, and Ralph had it painted and had an exhaust system put on it. Got it all. I mean, it was just nice. It was nice. The doctor came in, and the doctor had his family with him, and he came in the station wagon. And I don't know if y'all are old enough to remember the Woody station wagons that had the wood panels on the side. That was the doctor's car, and he had the whole family in the car. And the car stayed running, and the air conditioning was on in the car, I'm sure. And the whole family was in there. And so Ralph came out, and Ralph gave him the keys to the car. And he, this gentleman cranked the car and immediately stalled it. And he stalled the car about 3 or 4 times before he got out the front gate of the shop. And we heard the tire squeal several times as he went down Ashley Road toward Wilkinson Boulevard. Well, when he was gone for a little while, but most of the guys that were working in the shop had heard the car crank and heard the car leave. And, when something like that happened, Mitzi and Ralph didn't mind us if we sort of came out and enjoyed some of this. And when the doctor came back in, he parked that car just about where he came out, and it sort of rolled in. It went, and he got out of the car, and Ralph was standing there, and some of us were over off to the side, and I don't think he ever broke stride. Tossed the keys for the car to Ralph, and I heard him say, "Sell it, my son will kill himself."
Oh.
Got back in the station wagon, pulled out, and left.
Wow.
How about that?
Wow.
And,
Too powerful.
The car got taken around to the back into the fabrication shop, and a tarp was put over it. And one Monday morning we came in, and the car was gone. Now, I don't know where it went to, but the famous, Sunbeam Tiger.
Interesting. Wow, that's good stuff. Let's take a quick break, and we'll be right back to Racing Roots with Hamm with Blue Weber. We're going to get into some of your questions. If you have a question, put them on there for us, and Traci will get to that, and Bryson will get to it on your Facebook questions. We'll be right back. Racing Roots with Hamm.
Real Country 550 and 92.9 WAME and W225BD Statesville.
American Stainless Tubing, a subsidiary of the Synalloy Corporation, is hiring for both their Troutman and Statesville facilities. They are in need of machine operators and general laborers. They offer a full benefit package after 60 days, as well as competitive wages. And American Stainless offers a competitive starting rate of $19.50 to $21.25 an hour for general and semi-skilled employees. You can also start earning vacation time after only 90 days. Come by and pick up an application at either location, 129 Honeycutt Road in Troutman or 123 Moorhead Road in Statesville. Make your move to American Stainless Tubing.
With more than 20,000 students, Iredell Statesville schools rank among the 20 largest school districts in North Carolina. Our teachers represent a wealth of knowledge, with the average teacher in our district having 15 years of teaching experience. Iredell Statesville Schools' innovative approach blends a one-to-one technology initiative with collaborative best practices and a hands-on approach to learning. In addition to traditional school settings, the district provides a wide range of exciting educational opportunities through our choice programs, specifically designed for unique student needs. No matter your age, your background, or your personal goals, there's a place for you in the Iredell Statesville schools.
And we're back to Racing Roots with Hamm right here on 550 AM, 92.9 FM. And we've got Blue Weber in with us this evening. And Bryson was going to get back to one of the questions that we had earlier from Ron Algebright.
Yeah, so Ron asked us about the incident that happened yesterday on the last lap of the Roval 400. And I was there, didn't know this happened, and so I pulled it up, done a little research, and he actually sent me one of the press releases about it. But what happened was you've got Chase Briscoe and Cole Custer, who are teammates at Stewart-Haas Racing. Cole Custer's not in the playoffs, but Chase Briscoe yesterday at this time was right on the cutoff line to make the round of 8. So Cole Custer's running 2 cars in front of Chase Briscoe. He slowed up on the backstretch, which almost kind of caused a pretty big accident. Nobody really wrecked, but they kind of bumped, and Briscoe got around 2 cars, which put him +2 over Kyle Larson in the race, therefore sending him to the next round of the playoffs. So NASCAR has since said that they are reviewing the incident, and so they're going to announce whatever they're going to do next week, but they said it won't affect the playoffs, so Briscoe will still be in the playoffs and all that good stuff, but Custer may get a fine or something. But he was asking about our take on that. I'm watching the video, and I didn't know that this happened, but you can tell just by watching this that it's completely intentional because Cole Custer doesn't hit the wall or anything. There's no contact. Nobody's around him, and they come up on him on the back stretch, and he's just, quite a bit slower than the other cars coming. So, they've ran 112 laps of that same pattern for the whole day. So it's not like he made such a big mistake where he's I don't know, 20, 30 miles an hour slower on the backstretch. So I think it's intentional. Since they're teammates, it kind of he talked about the Michael Waltrip incident at Richmond with Clint Boyer sending Truex into the playoffs, and I don't know if it's necessarily that severe, but I do think it was intentional. So it'll be interesting. I think they'll probably give Cole Custer maybe some sort of penalty, which won't really affect him since he's not in the playoffs. So maybe a fine or something.
Okay.
And they'll probably try to appeal that, which the appeals have really been working lately. William Byron won his appeal in his incident that he had at Texas. So I don't know. I think it's intentional. Didn't really know it happened, but that's going to make the week interesting as far as that goes.
All right. Very good, Bryson. Thank you.
Yeah.
Just Blue, do you watch the race at all?
Very seldom.
Okay.
Very seldom.
Yeah, I kind of miss them most of the time too, because I'm usually busy doing a lot of other things. I guess I should say, trying to get caught up on.
Well, we just sold the farm, so
Yeah.
I've been tied up with horses.
Yeah.
And I should say my wife's tied up with horses, and that means I'm tied up with horses.
Okay.
And
Yes.
my wife has all the top honors of the American Riding Instructors Association, and her whole career of about 45 years. I'm sorry, Leanne, if you're listening. I just told your secret. But she's a phenomenal instructor teaching English, and because of that, I drive the truck. When the kids go to places and things like that, and I'm actually living with my daughter and son-in-law at this point because we're having a new house built since we sold the farm, and the reason to sell the farm is to get out of the horse business, and that's where my machine shop was, on the farm. So that's why Blue is happy to know that the machine shop is going to be carried on by Ben Haig, and I'm going to go to my new place. I'm going to put my new house up. There's some friends of mine that are going to plant fescue grass to cut hay off of with, and I'm going to be very careful to watch that fescue grass grow from the front of my, and I'm going to tell them when they need to come cut that grass, and make hay out of it.
That's going to be money growing, right? I mean,
well, it'll take a little while, but
Okay.
Joe Hodges knows what he's doing, so I'm sure.
I did want to ask one more question about Ralph Moody, and it's just a kind of a quick thing. Did he ever talk about being in World War II?
No.
Never? Okay.
No.
Because he drove a tank for Patton's Army in World War II, from what I heard.
Let me tell you something. I never knew that.
Yeah. I saw it on Twitter, so it must be true. Yeah.
I didn't know that, but there were several things that Ralph was not a totally private person, but he didn't, there's stuff out of the families and long reaching. He was just such a super individual. And again, just like Mr. Wilson, I was so fortunate to have worked for him and to have gone through the experience with him that, it's just, that's all I can say. It was just a great time.
Yeah.
And
man,
a wonderful, wonderful period of life.
Good stuff. I did talk to Will Cronkite, our good friend. He's actually sleeping because he's going on a big trip tomorrow. But he called me earlier today, and he said that he worked with Ralph Moody around 1975 is when he worked with him, and on into
that was right
80.
after I was there, because the last time when Mr. Parsons won his points championship, that we were talking about earlier, it was just after that the fuel crash came.
Okay.
And and Ralph knew that the contingency money and all that stuff was just going to all fall out.
Right.
So that's when I had to leave. But and that all worked out. And I will tell you that in later months, I'll put it that way, Ralph used to come over to the shop and he would work on 2300 Ford motors for Ralph Jr. and they were racing somewhere, and he would. Of course, he had the run of my shop. He could do anything you wanted to.
Okay.
And so he'd come in and he'd do little things to cylinder heads, and he'd have me mill blocks and bore blocks and stuff like that, and he'd put things together. And Mitzi would come over sometimes, and it was just so great to have all that. Sure. And little Ralph was flying all over the world. His job as an engineer wouldn't allow him to spend time over there. But Thurman Young also used to come over. Thurman was a beekeeper, and I'm going to tell you his story real quick. He got out of racing and went to the mountains, and he was allergic to the bees. And somehow he did not have his Benadryl with him, and the bees turned on him and killed him.
Oh, no.
And that's how we lost Thurman Young. But Thurman taught me so much, but he would come down out of the mountains and pick up his 2 little girls. And I had a German Shepherd dog in my shop, and his little girls would come over, and they would wallow all over the floor with that German Shepherd. And he loved those little girls. And there were some other of my friends that had children that would come over and do the same thing. But and when Thurman got out of racing, he just got out of racing. He was done. He was done. He wanted out.
Oh, it's back to me now. So we've talked about your working with the Moody's and what have you. What was the beginning for you? What made you interested in working on vehicles or cars or motors or any type of thing?
That might be an interesting question for several different reasons, but my dad bought me a bicycle. I had to keep it up, and went from that to keeping up his cars before I had a driver's license. And from that, Dad gave me the use of a garage. And my neighbors did not really appreciate me cranking engines up with some of the cars, and I was one of these hot rod kids.
Oh, yeah.
And in the 60s, the guys with the fastest car got the dates with the prettiest girls.
That's correct.
I was in the running.
There you go.
And in 66, when I went into service, all that kind of stopped. When I came back, I tried to go to college, and I'm not going to say where, but veterans at that point in time were very much looked down on. And you just couldn't go to college because the anti-Vietnam stuff was very, very prevalent. And I made it through one semester, and I told my mama that, and it really disappointed her, that I needed to get away from that. So I went to Charlotte and hid. And I worked in various automotive shops before I got into machining. So that's sort of the trace of how I got into this. I was a mechanic before I was a machinist. But it was one of these things that one sort of led into the other. And I had some pretty quick little drag race cars back in my day. And of course, the funny thing about that was after I was kind of gone before I got my Corvette, but there was a gentleman named Bill Davidson that had a Chevrolet dealership in Elkin. He was one of the ones that the Federal Bureau investigation. And we talked about that, and he was interviewed for my top secret clearance. He knew that I loved that style of Stingray car. One of them came in that had a bad paint job on. It was a doctor from Winston-Salem. He painted that car, put it in the back of his shop, and put a tarp over it. And when I came home, and it was a little while before he had Dad, drive me up there. And at the time, I had a 66 396 Chevelle, and it was a quick car. It was a known car. And got up there, and Mr. Davidson had that Corvette brought out. And here was this beautiful blue 65 Corvette. I mean, just knocked your eyes out, brand new paint. And Mr. Davidson said, how about driving me downtown? I was going to get to drive a 65. I don't know if you could imagine that, but I drove him downtown. He said, I've changed my mind. Take us on back to the dealership. I got out of the car, and he looked at me and said, son, I don't know what you did, but there's a lot of us that didn't think you were going to come back. I'll sell you that car, if I remember correctly. I've got sales invoice, for $3,200. I'll give you $1,800 for your Chevelle, and GMAC has already approved the financing. All you got to do is tell me you want it.
Wow.
And that's some of the background story.
Now, how old were you at this point? Maybe early 20s?
Early 20s.
How amazing is that?
Because I actually left, and I won't tell you about what my daddy did, but I was going to forego my senior year of high school, and the first general order I got from the United States Navy was to finish my high school education.
Oh.
And Daddy never admitted to it. But there was some collusion with a recruiter. Mm-hmm. But anyway, the end result out of all of that, and the timing and all of that, my service years were 66 to 72, somewhere in there. And to be truthful, I try to forget all that. I don't talk about much of that.
I'm sure.
But there's the car is an iconic part of my history, so I might as well brag about that. Yeah. I'm sorry, David.
That's good.
We love cars.
Yeah.
Especially older cars.
I think all of our listeners do too. Yes. They love the stories as well. So every story you've been telling us has been great. Yeah. Very interesting. See, I told you to be interesting, and people would love to hear the story, and the time would fly.
Well, I figured that they'd all be asleep by now.
No.
Listen to all my junk.
No, they're still hanging on, doing good.
I like your Holman-Moody shirt, by the way.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know if the people can see you. I hope they can, but you got your Holman-Moody shirt. Oh, look at that.
I realized that when we got here.
Look at that. Competition proven.
Dad calls it homeless and muddy.
You know,
yes, he did.
Because of that, can you dial in on a little business card?
Yeah, I can.
Okay.
Sure. I'll put it over here.
I think I know that I have one of the business cards, and because of that, when I put my shop together, I knew that the logo was important, and the logo was drawn for me. That's my business card, and that logo is machine work targeted to excellence. That's what that logo is. And you know, that was done for me by some people who knew the competition proven logo, and that logo has been around for a while.
There you go. I covered up the phone number, by the way.
It don't matter.
Probably didn't need too many.
I'm out of the business, folks.
No, this show will it'll be on a replay tomorrow
like
and the next day.
A chess piece.
And so.
And a vice grip is what I see.
Vice grip.
Is it not a vice grip?
A micrometer.
Yeah. Okay.
That's a micrometer. A chess knife. The chess knight was a symbol of excellence. Mm-hmm. The micrometer was an emblem of machine work, and the target you could see. Mm-hmm. So it's machine work targeted to excellence.
There you go. Did you come up with that on your own, or did you have help?
No, I had help.
That's good though.
And as a matter of fact, there was. It was nice to have some people that really did know what they were doing to help me put that together. I gave them the ideas, and they kind of put it together for me.
Good. They did a good job.
But that's been around for a long time. I guess 40 years.
So Bryson has something else to add over here.
Yeah, we've got some people listening that I want to kind of shout out, give tell them, hey, Greg Gull and Buddy Foss both tuned in, and Perry Garris says, good to see Blue on the show, as he always did me well with all of my machine work that I could not accomplish myself. So that's Perry Garris, and that's all that I've got so far. So.
Thank you very much. Yeah. I appreciate that.
Very good. Perry Garris, thank you for tuning in, and our buddy Foss.
Yes, Buddy Foss and Greg Gull.
And Greg Gull, yes. Buddy worked in NASCAR for a while. He worked on the old, he worked in Jimmy Spencer's team, and Winston racing and the what was that other one? Anyway, I get it.
Oh, you're just an absolute warehouse of NASCAR knowledge.
Yeah, I've got a lot of we got a lot of racing friends. It's like when I post something on Facebook, I'll be like a who's who of racing. We'll go in there and comment and like it. So
that's great.
It's kind of like my people.
That's great.
I guess so. And
I really appreciate you keeping the old racing stuff alive too.
Absolutely.
The old people like Mr. Taylor and Larry Wallace and Waddell Wilson and things like that. Most people in today's world don't have any idea what Holman and Moody was.
Yeah. I think that they need to have a history lesson for anyone that wants to work in NASCAR, anyone that wants to, if they seriously want a job, they need to know the history and they need to know about the people that were there before.
Well, if you want a good history lesson, buy the Holman-Moody book.
Yes, I have it. I meant to bring it with me. I was going to show it to you.
Well, we didn't talk about Waddell's book either.
You're right.
We didn't do that.
I have it sitting on my dining room table. I was going to show you that. I had Waddell sign the book.
I told you that mine got stolen.
Right. Yes.
So, and I can't replace it. So.
Well, it's on eBay now.
Is it now?
Yeah. There's. I found mine on eBay, and there's one on Amazon. There's one on. I think eBay and Amazon are right there.
I might have to,
check it out.
Yeah, I might have to check. As a matter of fact, I might have to ask you to help me to check it out.
Help you with
I
it.
don't know what to do with any of this stuff.
Yeah.
So when David and I went to Mount Airy and David presented Waddell with the book to sign, he says, "Where'd you get this?" He was totally floored that David had that book for him to sign.
He had no idea how many secrets he was giving up.
And David told him, he says, "I owe you $1."
Yeah, I said I meant to bring you $1.
And the reason for that is that's how much money Waddell made off of each copy of the book.
Correct.
So if you didn't correlate to that,
or were to
that's
make.
what that was.
Yeah.
But the idea of that book is that Mr. Wilson had no clue how many secrets he was giving up when he had a ghostwriter, and
Steve Smith, is that the?
I don't know.
He wrote the book with him. I know that.
Yeah,
but
and the idea of Mr. Wilson was just such a great guy. I mean, he wrote the book because he thought it would help people.
Mm-hmm.
And
I've heard stories of people like Junior Johnson saying, "Hey, go and get that book that Waddell wrote. We need to check this out." Because
I'm sure David
needed an answer for something.
We've actually heard that.
Yeah,
Whether
we
it's
have.
a joke or not, we don't know. But yeah, we've heard it.
I'm pretty sure it was for real. For reals.
Yeah.
Yeah. I want to say hey to our buddy Dickie Dennis. We got to run into him. We stopped over in Hopewell on the way back from Williamsburg. We went to Williamsburg for the weekend, a long weekend.
Yeah, you told me that.
Yeah,
For a
it's
surprise.
Jamestown, Yorktown, saw the battlefields, and then we stopped over in Hopewell and visited Dickie and went over to where Ulysses S. Grant's headquarters there in Hopewell.
Okay, here's some wise words for all your listeners.
Yes.
You better listen to an old man.
Mm-hmm.
That's true.
Because you need to go and do and enjoy while you're young. Because when you get to be my age, your body isn't going to let you do that. So you need to enjoy everything you can. Get out there and live life.
Yeah.
Because, now there's not a lot that I didn't do. But there's a couple places that I might
Bryson.
like to have gone. Hear that, son?
Yes, absolutely.
I feel like I tell David that all the time.
And that was part of the reason why I retired early, and so that I could end up going and doing that and enjoying doing things. And then I got busier than I ever got. So now I'm starting to see that I'm going to have to turn my brain off every once in a while and get back to doing the things.
There's iconic things in this nation, and by the grace of God, by the way, you were born here. You could have been born somewhere else, folks.
That's exactly right.
And, every country in the world doesn't have the niceties of that light switch on the wall.
Very
and
true.
they don't have the niceties of turning on that water spigot and have hot and cold running water. And there's places in the world that the refrigeration's not in their vocabulary. But there's places like the Grand Canyon. Everybody needs to see the Grand Canyon. That is such a phenomenon of what God put on this earth. You need to see that.
I was 4 hours away and I didn't do it. So
Well, backtrack.
yeah, we're going to do that.
backtrack.
We've already talked about our next trip.
I was fortunate enough to get to see the north rim of the Grand Canyon this summer.
Okay, you need to go to the south side.
That's what I've heard. That's what I've heard. That's just a reason to go back. So
I've been on both sides.
Yeah.
And there's some places out there that, I'm told that I have native blood, and I didn't find that out till late in life. It was closet history, and nobody talked about that kind of stuff. I mean, you could get hung if a Caucasian woman was married to a Native American. Did take your life. And I shouldn't say things like that, especially on radio.
It's history.
But the idea behind some of this kind of stuff, places that have iconics, that, there's so much in our nation. There's so much stuff that you just really need to see. Your trip out to Williamsburg and the battlefields and things like that, that's stuff that you can see pictures, but when you see it in person, that makes a difference. You need to see things like Yellowstone. You need to see Yosemite. There's beautiful things out there that God put in this nation, and you got the opportunity to visualize it yourself. Take advantage of it.
Yeah, there you go. Just plan it and do it. Make it happen.
You got it.
Make it happen, Captain. That's whenever we went to Williamsburg the first day, and I decided, I do all this video all the time, and I said, what, I'm just going to take it in and enjoy it. And then afterwards, I was like, I didn't even take
even though I kept saying, get your camera out, get your camera out.
I was just going to try something different, and I ended up regretting it. So I said, all right, we're going to go back. So we did a lot of walking. I mean,
we did a lot of walking.
I think it was more than 13,000 steps, because sometimes you cross your arms and walk.
My watch wasn't working right.
Okay, here you go. What I said just a while ago, David.
Yes.
While you're young and you can do that.
Yeah.
Because Blue Weber can't do that anymore.
Right. Yeah, we did a lot of steps.
I can't do that.
All right. So that would be your best advice to tell our friends out there now.
Absolutely.
That's good advice.
Enjoy life when you're young.
Yeah. Right.
Because you're not going to be young forever.
Yeah.
That's right.
Just not going to be there.
So Dargan has a question. He says, ask Blue if he worked with Gracie Smith at Holman and Moody.
I did not, but I have heard the name. And I think probably that was within the era of Pete Taylor. And if he's listening, that's probably in that era.
Gotcha.
Now, I think I mentioned Pete Taylor's employment number was 01.
Right.
And he built all of the engines for Ralph Moody's race car, his personal race car that he drove. And I think Gracie was in part of that kind of crew that worked back in that era. And, Mr. Wilson came in after Mr. Taylor. And then Mr. Wilson also continued. There were several different race teams. Let me think while I scratch my nose.
While you're thinking about it, I'm going to mention that I finally got to meet Freddie Smith, and I finally met him after all the years that I hung around dirt tracks and stuff. And I heard about Gracie and Freddie and all them, and I finally got to meet him over at Phil Combs' place.
There were so many people that every once in a while they'd come through Ralph's shop. And I'd get to meet somebody that came through, and there were some things that happened. I remember. I'll tell a quick Bobby Allison story.
Yeah.
Bobby Allison's car was in the year that I was there, and the Alabama gang was his relatives, and they were putting the cars together in Alabama. They would take Mr. Wilson's engines down there and put them in, and they got the exhaust manifold on the driver's side right underneath the accelerator pedal. Well, when the race got going, and there wasn't any insulation down there, Bobby burned his foot. He had a dramatic burned foot. He wouldn't stop.
Oh, yes.
He just kept going.
He's a tough one.
And that's the kind of racer Mr. Allison was.
Yeah.
And when he came into the shop the next week, he was actually hobbling. He could barely walk through the shop the next week.
Yeah.
I ran into Mr. Allison years and years later, of all places, at Cracker Barrel.
Oh.
And I reminded him of that story, and he smiled.
Yeah. He knew he's tough. Yeah, I'll tell you what, I always mention if there was one of the toughest drivers, he has to be it. Because he would race somewhere, jump in his airplane, and take off and fly over to another racetrack.
Oh, yeah. Mr. Allison wanted to be, if there was somebody racing somewhere, he wanted to be in a race car.
Mm-hmm.
The thing about LG DeWitt was the sponsor for Benny Parsons. And if you needed something for a race car, Mr. DeWitt shipped peaches all over the United States, and he had a fleet of trucks. He had a trucking company. And if Benny Parsons needed something from anywhere in the U.S., you could have it within a day.
Mm-hmm.
And several times when things came up and Waddell and two of the other guys after the end of the Ashley Road thing, they were down there at Ellerby, and they would need something, and if you'd make the people in the office down in Ellerby with Mr. DeWitt's, let them know what it was and where it was, you might have that in your hand the next day.
Which is kind of unheard of. They didn't have Amazon back then,
No. And some of the speed limits, I think, were broken sometimes if there was a race coming up.
Huh. Well, that's interesting.
But
that's cool.
that was a fun part of that deal.
I've not ever heard much about LG DeWitt. I know that he on that team, or he was with Benny Parsons in '73, and you see pictures of him on the victory whenever he won the championship and stuff like that.
Yeah. Now, the other thing about those guys at that time, if there was anything that broke down on the farm, they would bring the stuff over to the race car shop. And their equipment was so equipped that if you needed something done for a cylinder head for a tractor or something repaired, those guys would they'd fix up the equipment for the farm.
Oh, yes. Now, I've heard that on Junior Johnson's, talking about them too.
I don't know how much of that went on, but I know some of it was because during that period of time, I was selling equipment for Phillips Tool and Equipment, and that's where part of my education came from, because Fred Phillips was a manufacturer's agent, and that's where some of my equipment came from when I put my shop together.
Okay.
But I heard some interesting stories about how some of that stuff would get fixed and some of the parts would come about.
Sure. Yeah. Well, how about that? And it's so, Mr. Blue Weber, thank you so much for coming in and hanging out with us this evening. That was it's been a great show. It's been great hearing your stories, and our listeners are still commenting and really enjoying it. And you got any parting words for our friends out there?
Keep racing.
There you go. Keep on and go see everything that you can while you're still young.
You got it.
That's great advice. I hadn't
That's
really.
terrific advice.
Yeah, Bryson's going to take that. I think he said he was going to quit school and then start traveling the world.
That's exactly right.
Now, I didn't say quit school.
No, you didn't.
No,
I didn't
gotta
say
finish
that.
That's important.
No, you did say earlier education.
As a matter of fact, I said one of the keys to getting ahead in this world is get your education.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Get your education. You need it badly.
Right.
It's the new world out there.
Yes, exactly. Good job on that. All right.
All right, buddy.
All right. Thanks so much.
Thank you, David.
We'll see you. If y'all have any more questions or any questions, you can put them on here after the show is over with. You can go back and watch the stream. Go back and watch the whole show again, and then just pop the questions on here. And make sure you hit that thumbs up if you like it. And if you want to subscribe, you can as well. So because you'll stay tuned every Monday evening. We have a new guest from the racing world. Tell us their stories, their paths, their racing roots. Very good. Thank you, Bryson.
Yeah.
And
I was going to help you out. But then I was like, no.
Yeah, that's all good. We'll practice on that, and then we'll make it happen sometime.
I was just going to make a comment.
Go for
Charles
it.
Jackson commented on our YouTube and said, LG DeWitt was an investor in Rockingham Racetrack. He had lots of peach orchards. The second race at Rockingham was called Peach Blossom 500.
How about that?
Oh, okay. Very good.
How
That's a
about
little
that?
knowledge that nobody knew.
Yeah,
Little
thank you,
nugget of
Tracy.
knowledge.
That's
Yeah.
wonderful.
Yep. Thank you for that. Very good. All right. We'll see y'all next Monday evening at 7 o'clock to Racing Roots with Hamm.